Thank you very much. Well, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for being here today and presenting my research. My name is Samuel Jesus, and I'm going to present to you research titled Dignity, Responsibility, and Reciprocity, a Framework for Non-International Armed Conflict. I'm a political theory and international relations and human rights PhD candidate, and I'm going to present my research that is ongoing. Despite its 19th century roots, international humanitarian law binding nature is increasingly at risk, as we see in current conflicts. Examples are Ukraine-Russia and Gaza conflicts. Nevertheless, we cannot forget the non-international armed conflicts in Africa, like in Congo or Sudan, or in Central African Republic, where I am right now. Sovereignty recognition, the line between domestic and international law, and separating natural from positive law, sustain legal voluntarism, reinforce non-intervention, and challenge domestic rights alignment with global rights. Non-international armed conflicts rules initially in the Geneva Convention's third common article and clarified in 1977 with additional Protocol 2 now cover national non-international armed conflicts, but remain still the least regulated. State sovereignty, which allows for a state of exception and limits citizens' rights combined with weak accountability, hinders responsibility for human rights and humanitarian law. Mario Bettati states sovereignty is the mutual guarantee of torturers. In this vein, the use of violence to contain violence, as Jean-Pierre Dupuy pointed out, every step towards improving the effectiveness of violent methods to contain violence, we will be thrown into a vortex like a thread of straw, spinning all which offers minimum protection during armed conflicts. The problem remains when states, due to a lack of consensus and UN Security Council inefficacy, establish states of exception that becomes norms. Consequently, decision makers use hermeneutic criteria like isolationism, utilitarianism, and mercantilism applied by agents. Values of dignity, responsibility, and reciprocity, core to a humanistic renewal, overshadow protectionism and drive accountability and minimum protection for victims. Ensuring states uphold human rights and IHL, International Humanitarian Law, is vital to safeguard individuals and populations. This article aims to integrate Mario Bettati critical globalist theory with Jean-Pierre Dupuy ethical relationism and views on responsibility, particularly in relation to international humanitarian law, as supported by other actors to strengthen its foundation. In conflicts between reason and violence, minimum reason should prevail, even if force is involved. The research asked is, what ethical foundations support the binding nature of law in non-international armed conflicts? Currently, it seeks to connect dignity, responsibility, and reciprocity, translating abstract concepts into concrete applications while considering the multilateral, and intersubjective nature of humanitarian norms. We adopt a critical and constructivist approach to examine norms of non-international armed conflicts, challenging a state-centered concept within a new world order. Using inductive reasoning, we relate Mario Bettetti's critical globalist theory to Jean-Pierre Dupuis' relationist approach to international humanitarian law. We also apply immanent critique to evaluate non-international conflict, considering international humanitarian law and human rights standards, addressing contradictions between ethnocentrism and globalism. This study employs a qualitative analysis of literature on polylogy involving international relations, focusing on interactions between state and non-state actors, future trends, and political intervention. It draws on bibliographic and documentary research in international law and ethics, emphasizing human dignity, responsibility, and reciprocity. Drawing on Bettetti's and Dupuis' theories, this approach aims to enhance global ethical concepts and responsibilities of individual states and non-state actors. Considering human dignity prompts to us link about reciprocity and responsibility, which limits actions and relate to justice based on proportional reciprocity among equals. As Aristotle suggests, injustice often arises when the powerful neglect the weaker, both externally and internally. Victims of non-international armed conflicts deserve protection similar to international conflicts, but classification issues create challenges, as states often see these as internal matters. Recently, laws of non-international conflicts have aligned with international law, influenced by jurisprudence from international tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And international conflicts now also apply to international conflict rules now also apply to non-international armed conflicts. Mario Bettetti is a critic, constructivist focus on ethical evolution of international law and effectiveness of AHL in resolving humanitarian issues. He has proposed global solutions to armed conflicts and urgency of human rights. Non-international armed conflicts involve opposition to governments through violence to achieve political aims like autonomy, secession, or ending constitutional order. These conflicts occur between armed groups and states or among groups themselves as they seek supremacy. Despite being less regulated, conflict regulation began with the Labor Code during a civil war, the American Civil War. Positive regulation helps mitigate the savage instincts of combat and builds military discipline, but dissemination and awareness of duties are crucial. Bettetti emphasizes that battles fought at the expense of human dignity are lost, advocating for limits on means and methods to balance humanity with the military necessity. Nowadays, autonomous weapons pose new challenges, but armed conflicts rules remain human-centric. Violations are attributed to people, not machines. Normative laws must adapt to technologies like drones and cyber attacks, raising ethical and legal questions in remote warfare. Humanitarian principles are vital. Reciprocity can provoke restraint in conflict behavior. In an international conflict, one party respects humanitarian law, expecting the other to adhere to it for the sake of the civilian and those outside the fighting. However, in internal conflicts, religious and ethical issues linked with fanaticism hinder the development of humanitarian reciprocity. We can see a contradiction between containment and the proposal of annihilation. As René Girard pointed out, we are right to identify reciprocal action and the mimetic principle, the spring of violent imitation, which makes adversaries more and more like each other, is what we find at the root of all myths and of all cultures. On the other hand, what we seek is reciprocal humanistic action. For the law of armed conflicts to be effective, it must be widely respected by states and conflict parties. In non-international conflicts, parties need awareness of international humanitarian law and must respect it as legitimation and recognition, guaranteeing rights and duties. It should emphasize universality and consensual acceptance enforced through coercion, sanctions, and control. Implementation requires transposition into domestic law and education, special for military to prevent and enforce compliance. Command responsibility is to ensure armed forces and recognize armed groups understand their duties and how to respect them. Jean-Pierre Dupuy, as a philosopher and mathematician, explores moral, social, economic, political philosophy, science, metaphysics, and literary theory. His multidisciplinary work offers a critical view of current conflicts. Dupuy discusses the ethics of dissuasion, emphasizing reciprocity when adverse actions threaten peace. Reciprocal action and the mimetic principle reflect the same reality. For example, guerrilla warfare shows defending first can respond to aggression, highlighting reciprocity. This duality can either prevent or provoke extreme reactions, unifying human interaction. Under optimal conditions, isolated acts can escalate conflicts to war, driven by reciprocal violence or, in another way, its avoidance. Human mimesis is linked to animal mimesis and natural reality involving instinctive imitation. Irrational behavior, like accepting beliefs irrationally, leads to imitation, while rational evidentialism enables reciprocity. Responsibility is managed through individuals, organizations, and states to enforce reciprocal accountability. From a Western point of view, temporal linearity sees a positive evolutionary path based on the 18th century ideals, where later generations benefit from prior sacrifices. Ethical theory suggests prioritizing society's most disadvantages to pass benefits for. However, those who work hardest often benefit least, creating a need for balance to avoid rupture and extremism opposing humanism. Today, an opposing paradigm threatens the future through climate change or disasters, requiring our moral responsibility to prevent self-destruction. Scientific knowledge increases this responsibility for current and future generations. To embody our humanistic values, we must normalize their meaning and educate society and machines all worldwide to adopt an ethical normative standard, fostering true global citizenship rooted in humanistic principles. Resistance stems from society values which shapes individual attitudes and actions. As Bertrand Badi expressed, the thought of which Aristotle spoke the common denominator of a humanity destined to live together around a common codification. We highlight the war lasting legacy in human history, emphasizing the need for strong humanitarian norms based on principles such as distinction, necessity, proportionality, and humanity. Legal frameworks have improved to regulate hostilities, but the growth of actors, technological advances, and complex conflicts as enforcement and consensus. There's an urgent need to implement existing norms better and develop new ones to address more armed violence. Education, cultural change, and empowering individuals to advocate for human rights are essential. Reinforcing these principles and adapting them to new realities is key to preserving dignity and peace. Human dignity relies on universal values shared across humanity, acting as a basic currency in extreme situations like conflicts. Reciprocity, organization, and discipline underpin the recognition of conflict parties and protection of civilians through implementation is staggered in non-international armed conflicts. IHL, based on non-derogable principles such as restraint and distinction, aims to rationalize conflict, but challenges remain, especially in sovereign states with internal conflicts. Reciprocity helps contain irrationality, but ethic, religious, and fanatic issues threaten humanitarian principles, sometimes and often leading to extremism. Jean-Pierre Dupuy illuminated catastrophism, advocates for awareness of war extremes, linking past and future. Deterrence and mimicry influence conflict dynamics, often opposing autonomy and rationality. Identifying rational patterns and reciprocity is vital in such conflicts. Reciprocity also involves future-oriented actions that impact coming generations, emphasizing the importance of survival and improved conditions.
Samuel, can you finish within 1 minute? We are running out of time now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Humanity must hinder utilitarian pursuits driven by mass ideology, which diminishes autonomy. Technological advances necessitate regulation grounded in humanistic values. Most conflicts are of societal origins, but are less regulated due to a lack of consensus, rising sovereignty and fragmentation. Developing responses that respect IHL principles rooted in centuries of evolution is crucial in meeting modern challenges. Thank you very much for your patience, and I'm looking forward for your comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.